So Dan, we've talked a lot about open and a bit about open source, but how does open source software ultimately get to market?
Boy, that's a great question, Jeff. There are two primary, vectors for getting it into the market. One is that companies collaborate on some open source project, a very popular, meets a market need, and then anybody can go and download the software and deploy it, and it's free. The second mode, and we sort of learned that with a lot of the Linux distributions. The second mode is that all these people collaborate to build the software, and it's very efficient in terms of development cost, because you don't have every company duplicating everything in this package. And of course, this is only for parts of, for pieces of the, really the protocol stack that do not require vendor differentiation. We're all going to agree we use the same thing, but they all contribute to the development, and then they take the code, some code, all the code, whatever they want, into their companies, and they build proprietary products around it. And that's an efficient form of development, but then they have proprietary products that are more than just software, just services and support, I should say, for the open source software. They're actually embedded into proprietary products. That's how it's certainly going with things like Open Daylight, and things are getting to the market quickly. Some operators are developing their own solutions based on open source software. And that's an interesting phenomenon as well, especially if operators have software skills, and not all of them have that level of skill set yet. But I'm really optimistic that these open source efforts are going to give a lot of people experience in what should be done by open source software and how you make it into part of a reliable telco network. And we know the telcos have a strong belief in reliability, at least according to their traditional definition of it.
Well, over the past couple of weeks of our weekly show, Coders, we've talked about, or the topic has come up during the course of our conversations about web scale, hyperscale versus traditional telco 5.9 reliability. When you're talking about open source going to market, does it come out of the gate being 5.9 reliable or web scale, or what's the iterative process to actually get to the reliability and scalability needed by your members as well as other carriers around the world?
Well, first of all, some open source projects are very scalable and reliable, and some are not. And usually they mature over time. But as the networking and telecoms worlds move into software, the thinking changes about what it means to have this reliability. We know that they've all talked about the 5.9's reliability, and they've applied it on a box-by-box basis. But if you look at the over-the-tops, it's the service reliability, not the box reliability, that they think about. And as more and more services are really defined, dictated, and created inside a data center for a telco, they're going to follow the same practices that the software industry has followed. Namely, I'm going to have really reliable services built on unreliable hardware. You know it's going to fail. I know how to take it out of service, but I don't want my service to fall down. That's how distributed systems have succeeded. I mean, Jeff, you probably do some banking online, do you not?
Sure.
Yeah. So do you think your bank account is in one server somewhere?
I have no idea.
And if the power supply fails, which is how they die, you lose your money? No.
Probably not.
Not going to happen. It's all distributed. It's all backed up. And we've got to get over this fear, in the networking world that, oh, no, we're putting into software and we're logically centralizing things, and that's going to cause failure, and we have to do 5. It's a whole different way of thinking. SDN is not just yet another protocol. It is a total transformation in the way people are going to think about networks. And as we're going to see the integration of compute, storage, and networking inside data centers where more and more things happen, we're going to find common tools to manage compute functions, storage functions, and networking functions all through control software.
Well, it's I spent half my career within a competitive phone company of one sort or another, and more often than not, I was kind of brought in as a change agent or started a DSL company or a CLEC, et cetera. And when you're recruiting teams together, you're finding folks that have the traditional telco background, and at the same time in the wireline world, at least in the late 90s and early 2000s, we're building these IP-based networks. And you're also running an internet company at the same time. And it was always a clash of cultures. And so when I see the mobile networks going to IP from a TDM architecture, some would argue that the telcos have their head in the sand, so to speak, in terms of the way we've done it for 30 or 40 or 50 years. How is the ONF, and I know you've talked a little bit about this, but how are you helping folks within the carriers be change agents and really adopt this transformation, which, by the way, has already happened in IT organizations and in many of the wireline internet companies for 10 to 12 years?
So, when we do, technical specification, protocol specs, we do architecture, we do software, and we also do market education, and we're now getting into skills certification. So we talk to them a lot. We try to help them understand how their business is going to change, how it'll be an opportunity for them as well as a challenge. And it's a long-term thinking process. And going from telco to IP networks is only half the battle. Because to go from IP networks to software-based operation is another stretch. You talk to someone and say, "Oh, we got all this IP stuff." Well, go to software. You don't need the people who've done IP, manual, command line interface configuration stuff. That's going to go away. You need people with real software skills where you're going to automate and program everything. So that's another leap for these folks. And they're some of them are a little frightened because they're getting bypassed by dark fiber and by the social media companies doing some local connectivity. And these companies are very fast moving. And if the major network operators want to compete, they're going to have to be fast moving also, which means they're going to have to figure out what their DNA is. And they'll concentrate on what they're good at, and they'll find plenty of people to procure services from or to offer services to. It's going to be a 10-year transformation of the service provider industry for sure, Jeff.
Interesting. Well, Dan, let's take a short break, and then I'd like to come back and have you talk about some of the specific programs, orientation programs, and skill development programs you're offering your member companies.
Will do.